Yes. All right. So welcome, bonjour. Today I'm going to give a brief overview of some of the ways that we approach communicating impact. And in the interest of time, I'm going to limit myself to one stakeholder, and that's government. So before I get started, what is Microscopy Australia? We're a distributed network of open access university-based microscopy facilities. We're funded by the federal government with co-funding from state governments and universities. We aim to accelerate discovery and innovation by making unique instruments and expertise open to all Australian researchers and businesses. Along with these open access facilities, we have a range of outreach, training, and professional development activities. One example is Microscopy. It's a free online microscopy training platform that's used by around 70,000 researchers every year. One thing to note is that we don't exclusively support bioimaging. We support a really broad range of techniques from atom probe tomography all the way through to cryo-EM. Because of this, we also support a really broad range of research. On an average day, I'm doing case studies on anything from quantum computing and photovoltaics through to archaeology, drug development, and agriculture. While this breadth is a real strength of our facilities, it also presents a challenge in communicating impact. We can't boil our message down to supporting cancer research, because while we do that, we do a lot more than that. And this can make it a really complex story to tell. And I know a lot of your facilities also support really diverse projects. So how can we get some of this impact across? Traditional impact metrics are useful, particularly in benchmarking your facility against other research infrastructures. Things like the number of users, publications, patients. But these don't really tell the story of the breadth of impact across disciplines or the crucial nature of support provided by our experts, often over long timescales. Just quickly, if you were looking at that last slide thinking, whoa, Sally, we are not even at that point yet. These are some absolutely fantastic resources, particularly this paper by Global Bioimaging led by Laurence Lejeune. Really recommend it. So how can we get some of this impact across? And what are some of our key considerations when we're talking to government? The first thing is to be really careful with assumed knowledge. Most of the bureaucrats and the ministers that I work with don't have a background in science. For this reason, traditional academic metrics fall flat. Similarly, jumping straight in there with the message that microscopy is fundamental for innovation and research in Australia falls over at the first hurdle if they don't know what the word microscopy means. And my experience at government forums and at industry trade shows, and when I'm saying industry here, I mean businesses, is that they don't know what the word microscopy means. And the same goes for imaging. They might associate it with X-rays or CTs, but they're not going to be thinking of microscopes. Even if they do kind of get the association to the word microscope, that comes with baggage as well. Their only experience with a microscope might have been in a high school biology class, and that's not the same thing we have in our heads about what we're doing. The last thing to keep in mind about these stakeholders is that they are time poor and they often have remit over huge portfolios. For example, we're one of 26 other NCREST projects that cover everything from HPC to marine vessels, and this small team has to be across all of them. They just don't have the capacity to deeply understand our particular breed of science. So how can we help them and in turn help ourselves? The tactic we've found most effective is to tie our messaging to something that they do know and to make it useful to them. So that means researching their priorities and their stakeholders' priorities and aligning our communications with their context. So how do I go about identifying these priorities? It's about digging into new policies, ministerial statements, and participating in consultations, but mostly it's about listening to the language they use and using their language back to them. It's also about deeply understanding the context and the landscape that they sit within. For us, it's the NCREST team who sit within the Department of Education. For the NCREST program and our funding to continue to exist, they need to convince Treasury that their program is good value for Australian taxpayers. And they need the support of the other Australian government departments and the large research grant bodies to do that. We can help them do this by providing evidence of how our activities align with their stakeholders' priorities. This approach applies to any of your stakeholders, whether it's your DVCR or the head of your institute. Think about what their priorities are and the kind of language they're using, and this will help you tailor a message that sticks. So what are our communication goals to government? We want to demonstrate what high-end microscopy is and the level of expertise it demands, the alignment of our activity with government priorities, that we provide good value to Australian taxpayers, and the key role our facilities play in the research and innovation landscape. So let's talk about that first challenge. How do we talk about what microscopy is? For this audience, we found we get much better results when we talk about what imaging does than about the specific technologies. So we used to have this big list of all of the fancy techniques we had to show our infrastructure's diversity. But for the same reason I mentioned before, this fell flat. These names mean nothing to a funder. Instead, we've switched to using this graphic you saw earlier that at a glance kind of shows the scale of techniques and variety of scales within those techniques that our infrastructure supports. Also the variety of research. Even better if you can add a pretty picture. People love pretty pictures. So these are some slides that we actually use with new government stakeholders sometimes to tackle that misconception of what microscopy is. When we say microscope, we mean large-scale, cutting-edge specialist equipment and expertise. These kinds of slides start to tell the story of the breadth and impact that our research infrastructures support. Another thing that's really valuable, if you can find it, is a quote or a testimonial from someone they know and trust. It's worth its weight in gold, and this is particularly true for industry stakeholders. They're more likely to trust someone they know over a figure. All right, so now I'm going to talk a bit about how we align our messages with government priorities. So the Department of Industry, Science and Resources sets the strategic vision for science in Australia, and they do this through the National Science and Research Priorities. So this is a spread that we have in our research highlights, which I have a few copies of these. So if you're interested, come and talk to me in the lunch break. It's designed to show at a glance how our facilities support each of these priority areas with examples. It's a great tool the NCREST team could take into a meeting with one of their stakeholders to show just how one of their projects is supporting all priority areas. We also do the same for the National Research Infrastructure Priorities. And we also have a similar spread with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals when we're talking to an international audience. The other important stakeholder for the NCREST team are the major research grant bodies in Australia. For both of these, a key interest is the value of the range of grants supported research that relies on our facilities. One way we try to show this is by calculating the value of research grants that were supported specifically by NCREST-funded instruments and experts. We do this by pulling grant IDs from publication acknowledgements. It's not perfect, only around half of our publications actually include a grant ID, but $1.2 billion of research grants supported over 4 years is a pretty impressive number, and it gives a taste of the value our facilities provide to the Australian research ecosystem. We also collect traditional academic research metrics. I won't go into detail, but for this audience, we benchmark our performance against OECD and Australian average to give them context as to what these numbers mean. Research translation is another area of focus for all levels of government. We track startups that our facilities have provided significant support for in PitchBook, and looking at both capital raised and the value of the deals they've made. This allows us to say things like just 10 startups supported by Microscopy Australia have collectively raised more than $756 million US. But this is still quite abstract, so we always like to tie it back to our people and the infrastructure by following it up with a real example. We like to use, I don't know why that's gone blurry, sorry. We like to use timelines like these because it allows us to kind of show the impact that we've had on research translation over a really long time period. From fundamental research all the way through to investor presentations, preclinical trials, prototyping, right through to manufacturing. And here is another great example of the power of a testimonial, if you can get them from your users. Along with this, there's two things we always stress to funders in these contexts. It's that commercialization happens over really long timescales, and investment today does not mean a commercial outcome tomorrow. Check back in 10 or 20 years. And secondly, that this would not have been possible without the fundamental research that came first, and it's really important to continue to stress that to funders. The last thing I'd like to touch on is that most of these measures of impact rely on us being able to track our publications. We know about 1/3 of our users don't acknowledge the facility or staff, and 2/3 don't acknowledge Microscopy Australia, which leads to massive underreporting of impact. This is why the work GEBI and the RMS have been doing on the Acknowledgement Guidelines campaign is so important. Print it and display it if you haven't. 2 other quick ideas to share the love. Add your acknowledgement to your email signature, so each time you're in touch with a user, they can copy and paste it right into what they're doing and they're getting the reminder. And add your acknowledgement to the desktop background or computer screensaver on your computers, your Microscope computers in your data labs. So what are the key takeaways I'd like you to get from this? Be really cautious with jargon. Align your message with their priorities. Try and make it useful. And finally, why do all this? Your impact is real and it deserves to be recognized, so tell your story. Thank you very much for your time.